that's true. But the pastor is buying new doors in the church.
Right, amen.
So, you'll think, well, that's a door. Nah, it's going to be a serious shekel. We're replacing every door in this building and next door. And so you can now enter the back door, so you can use the ramps. But if you like using the front, be my guest. And just be patient with us. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be fixing all these doors. And we'll just be glad God is helping us to do that. Amen? If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Mark. If you would stand for the reading of the word, Mark chapter 7, verses 24 to 30. Mark chapter 7, verses 24 to 30. When you're there, say, I got it.
I got it.
All right. And from thence he arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon, and entered into a house, and would have no man know of it, but he could not be hid. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled. For it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it unto the dogs. And she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he said unto her, for this saying, go thy way, the devil is gone out of thy daughter. And when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out, and her daughter laid upon the bed. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, my God can do the impossible. You may be seated. For a few moments this morning, I want to preach on this subject, the granting of a seemingly impossible request. I'm just wondering if there is anybody in this house today who has a need in your life. And I have a hunch that many, if not every one of us in this place today, has a need that we need God to meet in our lives. And perhaps the need is so great that you don't even know if it can be met. But let me assure you that the God you came to worship today is the same God that can meet that need that you don't think can be met. Maybe you're looking at devastating family issues, financial difficulties, perhaps difficulties with your children, and here you are waiting in the floodwaters of a problem, and you need a miracle from the very God that you claim to serve. I mean, some of you may even be at the point that you don't need him to lift every burden, you just need him to lift some heavy ones. You don't need the whole loaf of bread. You just need a few crumbs. You don't need him to remove every mountain, just the highest ones. And if that's you, God is going to speak to you today. So in our text this morning, Jesus and his disciples go to the borders of Tyre and Sidon. And for those of you who don't understand the significance of those places, let me tell you, this is in the heart of Gentile territory. Now, the fact that Jesus went to the borders here is interesting because not only were Tyre and Sidon Gentile regions, but this area was a place that the Jews would have considered unclean. The region in which these cities were located had a very long history of paganism and opposition to the Jews. For instance, the wicked Queen Jezebel, you might have heard of her. She's the one who incited Ahab to worship the false god Baal and then persecuted Elijah the prophet. She was the daughter of a Sidonian king. Then you will also notice that there's historical tension between the relatively wealthy people of Tyre and the poor farmers and fishers of Galilee. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this area was that the chief god, small g, that the people of Sidon served was a god called Ishmael. Now, maybe at first you don't think that's very interesting, but Ishman was considered the god of healing. The god of healing. In fact, explorations of the ruins of large temples in Sidon have uncovered various statues of children with inscriptions of them talking about Ishman's healing of little children. Ishman was the healing god, supposedly, of little children. So isn't it interesting that this woman from Sidon came to Jesus to have her little child healed? And so we find in our text today that Jesus is trying to get some rest from the pressures of ministry, and we're told in verse 24 that he could not be hid. Say, he could not be hid. Here's the thing about Jesus. Wherever he is, he cannot be hid. And if Jesus Christ is in you, let me assure you, he cannot be hid. If he's in your home, if he's in your family, if he's in your life, wherever Christ shows up, it's in you and he cannot be hid. You ever been to a place and somebody just says, man, there's something different about you. I don't know what it is, but there's something that you just exude that's different about you. What is it? It's not because I'm just a cool cat. It's not because I look good. It's because I got the master of the universe living inside of me. And wherever you go, if God is in you, God is there. You can try to hide him. You can try to act like you don't belong to him. You can be in the company of all kinds of people who are lost and on their way to hell. But if you have Christ in you and you're there, you're going to stand out, folks. And people are going to notice you. Colossians 1:27 says, to whom God would make known what is the riches of glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. How many know that the God that is in you is the hope of glory? So you see, if Christ is in you and he is the hope of glory, then you and I ought to be seen as a hope to a dying world. Why? Because we have the hope in us. And if we're hope to a dying world, why can't he be a hope to you and I? But in our text in Mark, we have a burdened mother. We're presented with a heart-sick mother who locates Jesus because she's in a desperate situation. And she needs something changed in her life. She's not willing to go another day as normal. She's not willing to go another day as business as usual. She came to Jesus wanting a change, not tomorrow, not a week from now, but she came to Jesus wanting a change today. And so we find a mother who's desperate. And we find that she begins to petition Jesus for the help that she needs. And although she encounters some challenges, she persists until she gets what she came for. Now, Mark's account is interesting because he describes the woman as a Gentile woman, a Greek woman, particularly Syrophoenician by race. But if you read Matthew's account of the same story, chapter 15, it's interesting because if you read verses 21 to 23, you'll find this woman crying unto Jesus, begging him to have mercy on her and telling Jesus, not only is my daughter sick, not only does my daughter have some problems, but she says to Jesus, my daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. And in verse 23, it says, but he, Jesus, answered her not a word. Now, I don't know about you, but if I went up to Jesus and I said, my daughter needs to be healed because she's got devils in her, and Jesus ignores me, my first instinct would be to turn around and go home. In fact, we find that the disciples do tell her to go home. But I believe Jesus was testing this woman. He was testing her faith by ignoring her. Not only does he answer her not a word, according to Matthew 15, but it says that he begins to insult her by calling her a dog. Now, I don't know about you, but that probably at that point would have been enough for me to pack my bags and leave. I mean, it's one thing to be ignored, but it's another thing to be called a dog. How many know somebody crosses the line when they call you a dog? Amen? I don't think it's changed from Jesus' day. But I want you to hear me closely this morning, because there must have been something in the look of Jesus Christ. There must have been something as this woman stood before her and she saw something on his face. Or maybe it was something about the cadence of his voice which helped soften the seeming surface harshness of his word. And it emboldens this woman to confront Jesus with her need. And if you think about it, Jesus' response is in many ways sort of startling. And in almost every way unlike Jesus, because Jesus came to help. He came to heal. He came to save that which was lost. In fact, we always know he had a burden for children. Mark 10, I think it's 15, 14, somewhere around there. He tells his disciples, suffer the little children and bid them come. But despite the seemingly sharp and unusual response from Jesus, this woman did not take offense. Why? Because it was not only due to her faith, but her need was greater than how she might have felt. It's hot in here today. I don't know if the air's working or not. But you know what? Some of you have a need that is greater than the heat that you are feeling. Some of you have a need that is greater than the discomfort that you may be encountering. And what this woman said was, you know what? You can go ahead and you can call me what you want. You can say whatever you want to say, but I'm not leaving until I get what I came for. And so one thing this woman was that not only was she passionate, but she was determined. And so the scriptural account gives us instruction on how we should approach prayer in our lives. You see, when faith is real and faith is active, faith will make obstacles into opportunities. Faith will turn what seems to be stumbling stones into stepping stones to get us to the next level that God wants to take us. Faith recognizes that we are at the end of our resources, but there is nothing that He cannot do. Faith recognizes that my situation might be dire and it may be very serious to engage in a patty cake for Jesus prayer. And I'm not going to give a patty cake for Jesus prayer. Why? Because my need is too great. Faith recognizes there's no longer any sense of dressing up my prayers and making them pretty. And when we do that, like I taught you last week, we turn our face to the wall. And we groan out to God, and we pour out our hearts to God, and we cry to God so much that our eyeliner begins to make us look like clowns. Not endorsing it, just saying. We groan to God, we cry to God, we get to the point where we tell God, I'm not leaving until I get what I came for. Faith acknowledges and accepts the absolute and unyielding truth that with God, nothing is impossible. Our text tells us that a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him. It didn't matter that she wasn't Jewish. It didn't matter that the Jews hated her culture. She could have cared less about any of that. Instead, we find that she came and she bowed and she fell down at the feet of the master and begged the master to heal her daughter. Can I tell you something this morning? No? All right. See, I got to keep you engaged. I know it's hot in here. But listen to me. God will not answer 100% of your prayers that you never pray. I'll wait. I got time. Let that sink in. God will never answer 100% of the prayers that you never pray. Well, God knows my heart. Yes, he does. If we knew our heart, then why do we have prayer? Because we have to tell it. Because when we speak it, we're speaking faith in the knowledge that only he can change the outcome. So the first thing that we learn about this woman is that when she found out that Jesus was there, she came. Say, she came. So if you have a prayer that you need answered, if you have a miracle in your life that you need done, the first thing you got to do is come. You know what amazes me? Is that when people have a need, when their life is a mess, they don't come.
Right, that's it. Yeah.
We got this backward. We got it absolutely, totally backward. When we need something, that's not when we don't come to God. When we need something, that's when we have to come to God. Some of us need to stop acting like we got it all together. Oh, we got this apostolic thing down pat. We know how to look. We know how to clap. We know how to raise our hands. Some of us come in this place, we act like we don't need any help. But beneath that mask, your life's a mess. Can I get down to the neighborhood where you live and eat and sleep? Years ago, maybe I'll resurrect it, but I preached the message, get rid of the mask. I mean, we come to church and we got masks on showing everything's okay. But underneath, there's a storm brewing. Underneath that mask and that facade, there's a tempestuous storm that's going on. Instead of coming into this place like we got it all together, we need to tell God, my life's a mess. I need your help now. Amen. Now. And that's what happens in the text today. The woman gets real. She's tired of hiding the truth about her daughter. She's tired of telling the neighbors everything's okay. She's tired of telling the friends and the neighbors, well, my daughter's just a little under the weather. She's tired of covering the facade and making it seem like everything's okay. And so in our text, we find a mama who finally reaches the end of her rope and she cries out. And she cries out not just in her own home, but she cries out in front of the crowds. And she says, my daughter is vexed with an unclean spirit. My daughter is full of the devil. Woo! You want to talk about praying what you need. But we're dealing with a desperate woman. I don't know how old the girl is, but it's long enough to where she steps out of her culture. She steps out of her comfort zone. She steps out from where she lives, and she goes to people she don't know. She just heard of Jesus, and she said, listen, Jesus, my daughter's just not sick, but she's demon-possessed. She's done color coding it. Done putting a pretty candle on it. There's an old saying, you can put a tuxedo on a pig. It's still a pig. This woman got raw with the master. Her pretty little prayers to that false god, Eshman, guess what? It didn't heal her daughter. I don't know how many candles she may have lit. I don't know how much incense over the course of years she may have lit. I don't know how many names and times she called out to this false god Ishmael. And guess what? Her daughter's still vexed with a spirit. Her daughter's still unclean. Her daughter is still demon-possessed. But one day she said, I'm going to get real with the master. You got to come to church, leave your pretty little prayer in your car. You need to go to the Lord and give him definitive prayers. And you have to have him definitively handle your situation. And you need to say, look, I'm not praying for the sick right now. I'm not praying for the shut-in right now. I'm not praying for the President of the United States right now. I'm not praying for those behind prison bars right now. I'm not praying for the United States. I'm not praying for the world. Instead, I'm praying, Lord, I need you to come into my life. I need you to clean up this mess that I'm living in. I need a miracle. There's an old hymn, I don't think I've heard it sung in years. It says something like this, not my brother, not my sister, but it's me, oh Lord. Not the preacher, not the deacon, but it's me, oh Lord. Not my father, not my mother, but it's me, oh Lord. Not the stranger, not the neighbor, but it's me, oh Lord. I'm standing in the need of prayer. And the chorus goes, it's me, oh Lord. I'm standing in the need of prayer. And I'm just wondering, do we have the strength? Do we have the courage to come before God and stand in need of prayer for ourselves? We have to get to the place where we admit to ourselves, I'm not strong enough to do it. We view that as weakness. We view that as, well, I'm not a good mother. I'm not a good father. I'll tell you what that says. It means you got faith in the master of the universe. So step one, we got to come to a place where we make our petition known unto the Lord. And here's the second thing. When you desperately need something from God, you don't care who's around you. Ooh. Come on now. When you need something from God, you don't care who's around you. You don't care who's sitting in their pew looking at you. You don't care who's got their arms crossed. It's you and it's God. Why? Hey, God, it's me, oh Lord. I'm standing and I have a need. I think it's time that we forget about the crowds and we forget about the people to our left and to our right, and we realize this is about me. It's my soul. It's a daughter's soul. It's a son's soul. Matthew's account, the woman makes her petition known. Jesus seemingly ignores her. The disciples tell her to go home. Can you imagine? Let's just put that in 2024 for a minute. You come into this place. You have enough faith in the middle of my sermon, as awesome as it is. Man, I've done the great job. God has spoken in your heart. You got faith like nothing else. And you get up in the middle of my sermon, you come down to the front here, and you say, preacher, I need prayer. My daughter's demon-possessed. And I ignore you. Well, maybe you'll say to yourself, well, maybe you didn't hear me. Now let's take it a step further. Not only does the preacher ignore you, but my board members and my elders come up and say, sister, I think you need to go home. Am I bringing it down to where we live now? Can I ask you, how many would stay? I bet you the first inclination of many of us would be, well, obviously they don't care. I'm going to go back and don't expect to see me back. And if I'm going to be transparent, I might be like that. I mean, it's one thing to maybe come in and nobody shake your hand. But my goodness, you go up to the front, ask the preacher to pray for you, he ignores you. And then you have people asking you to go home. Woo! That's a whole new level. But that's what happened with this woman. Jesus, who she's heard about, ignores her. The disciples say, listen, lady, you need to go home. You're a Syrophoenician. You don't have any business here in this crowd. But let me tell you something. When you need Jesus bad enough, you don't care who says what or who does what. You don't care what people think about you. You don't care what they say about you. You don't care what's written about you on Facebook. You're not worried about somebody else's opinion. You're not worried about somebody else's definition or designation of you, because as long as you get what you came for, you'll do what you have to do. Because one thing this woman has that I think is lacking in a lot of Christianity today is something called resolve. This woman had to overcome some great resistance to secure her daughter's healing. And while this woman overcame the race issue, because remember, she's not a Jew. And while she overcame the religion issue, remember, she was polytheistic. Then she had to overcome what appeared to be, which was not, but what appeared to be Jesus' rejection of her. Then the disciples say, go home. Who would think it could get worse? I mean, that's a whole lot of bad. Right? I mean, that's a heap of bad. I mean, I might even dare say that's bad. But then it doesn't stop there. Because when the woman said, my daughter is vexed with the devil, Jesus, I need you to heal her, Jesus says to the woman, let the children first be fed. Now, you may not understand that, but what Jesus was saying here, in other words, let the Jews eat first. Because he said, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And while Jesus said those of the house of Israel may indeed have had priority. Let me assure you, the Jews did not have a monopoly on Jesus. And so we have Jesus saying that, while yes, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but since they don't want me, I'll show up for those who do want me. You see, this is the kind of God you and I serve. He's not just the God of the Jews, because if that were the case, I'd be lost. And I think probably most of you in this place would probably be lost. My God is a God of every whosoever will. And I thank God I'm a whosoever will. My God is a God of whosoever will, that says, I want to drink and come to the fountain of life. And so this woman refuses to take no for an answer. And she says, you know what, Jesus? Now, I don't know about you, but I think we just need to talk to Jesus. You know what? Sometimes maybe your theology doesn't agree with this. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. I'm human. Pray for me. Sometimes your preacher gets mad with God. Is that wrong? It says be angry, sin not. I don't sin. I just get angry. God, why haven't you done this? God, why are you allowing this? God, why am I having to go through this? I look at my enemies, they're sleeping sound at night. Here I am, it's midnight, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, I can't sleep. I'm worrying and fretting. But all my enemies are... So sometimes I just get mad at God. And I talk to God. And I say, why? How come? Sometimes he tells me. Sometimes I'm still waiting for the answer. But the one thing I like about the Syrophoenician woman is not only that does she not take no for an answer, but she engages Jesus. I don't think there's a problem sometimes if we engage with the Lord. Because guess what? If you don't communicate with your spouse isn't going to communicate with you. We're in a marriage with the Master. We need to communicate with him so he can communicate with us. And so this woman says, you know what? I don't care who gets served first. I don't care who sits at the table. I'll take the stuff that falls from the table. She looks at Jesus and she said, I don't need the whole loaf of bread. I just need some crumbs that fall from the table. Lord, you don't have to move the entire mountain. Just give me enough strength to be able to climb it. I know there's sometimes that God may not take the mountain away or lift the valley up, but he'll give you the strength to go through the valley and climb the mountain. The woman says, I get it. Let the children eat the bread first. She said, but I know. Like every good dog knows. If you got a dog, if it's like Princess Pickles, that dinner plate hit the table, she sits there. Because she knows with my boy, something's falling on that floor, either unintentionally or intentionally. All right? That woman knew inevitably something good from that table is going to fall. But again, we have to understand what she's up against. Not only did the Jews loathe Gentiles, not only did the Jews call Gentiles, and they called them dogs and mangy curs and rabid mongrels. Did you realize that a Jewish person wouldn't even let their garments be soiled from the dust of a Gentile area? And so when they would walk through Tyre and Sidon, they would pick up their skirts and they'd pick up their robes. So not even a speck of dust, Gentile dirty dust, would touch their clothes. Now, I don't know about you. That's a whole lot of hate. I mean, you talk about racism. Woo, we think it started 100 years ago. Started a long time ago. But here is this mangry dog that the Jewish people don't even want to touch. And there she is in the crowd. And she says, I'm not leaving because I know sooner or later something's falling. She said, sooner or later I know there's a crumb that's going to fall. And you may view it as a crumb, but that's going to be the key to my miracle. And in our lives, that's why I come to church on Sunday morning. That's why we come to church on Tuesday night prayer. That's why we come to Bible study on Wednesday night. That's why I'm going to come to revival services at the end of July and the beginning of August. That's why I come to youth service. That's why I go to camp. Why? Because I'm going to raise my hands in the sanctuary and I'm going to know that sooner or later God is going to give me what I need. And I'm so grateful that I don't need the whole loaf. All I need is a few crumbs that falls from God's table. You know, you want to know why some people can't shout? Oh, I'm going to preach now. Oh, when the preacher takes off his jacket. It ain't spiritual. I'm just hot. You know why some people can't shout? You know why some people have lost their dance and why some people have lost the pep in their step? Because they're waiting on the whole loaf. They're waiting on the whole loaf. They're waiting on everything to be put in order. But I don't know about you. I'm just glad to be in God's service one more time. Oh, I feel a song. There's a song that says, glad to be in God's service. Glad to be in God's service. Glad to be in God's service one more time. It says, you know what? He didn't have to let me live. He didn't have to let me live. I'm glad to be in God's service one more time. Hey, guess what? I'm glad to be in God's service today. Let me tell you, I may have come with a problem. I may have come with some mess in my life, but I'm glad I got breath in my lungs, and God has allowed me to come one more time to be in His presence. I got another opportunity to come to an altar in front of God and say, God, I'm standing here in the need of prayer. Come on. And so what did this woman do? She sticks around. And Jesus says, I haven't seen faith like this ever. Not even in the house of Israel. So in one sentence, Jesus Christ breaks the barrier of racial divide and said, this woman here has more faith than the entire nation of Israel. She said, I don't care what you call me. I don't care what you think about me, because I didn't come here for you. I came here for my daughter. And there's people in this place here today, and I'm getting ready to close. Your back is and has been up against a wall. You don't know which way to turn. Do I turn to the right? Do I turn to the left? Do I go up? Do I go down? Do I look forward? Do I look backward? Your life is so messed up, it's sort of like a detour in Michigan summers. I have been to the campground in Marshall, I don't know, 1,000,000 times. And there is so much construction between my house and Marshall, Michigan, I got lost. It took me 3 hours, which it took an hour and a half. I passed the same landmarks, I counted 8 times. And I got fancy GPS in my car. And I'm like, after the first 2 times, I'm like, I know I've passed this before. I just kept going in circles. I kept seeing the Michigan State flower, you know, that barrel. And it's funny, but some of our lives are no different. There's people, I'm talking to you right now, your life is in a mess. You don't know where to go. But I'm here to tell you, instead of throwing your hands in the air, instead of waving that white flag of surrender, instead of throwing in the towel and accepting what the enemy is throwing at you, you need to turn your face to the wall like I preached last week, and you need to say, Lord, I ain't going anywhere. I'm staying right here. I ain't leaving. Come hell, come high water, I'm going to get my answer today. And if I don't get it today, I'm coming back next service. And if I don't get it then, I'm coming back the next service, and the next prayer meeting, and the next Bible study, and the next revival, and the next revival, and the next revival. You ain't getting rid of me, God. I'm sticking around for the long haul. Do you want it bad enough? I think why Jesus ignored her and what happened to her was he was testing her faith. How bad, lady, do you want your daughter healed? How bad do you want your home put back together? How bad do you want your life put back together? How bad do you want to see your kids safe? I want it bad enough, Jesus. I'm going to stand against all opposition. That's right. His mama, his daddy don't come to church. His mama, daddy don't come to church Sunday or Wednesday. But there's a young man who gets dropped off in the front of the church. There's a boy right there who gets dropped off and he waits. Why? Because I know I'm going to get my prayer answered. I know I'm going to get what I need. I know that in the house of God, there is a balm in Gilead. I realize you face a lot of opposition. Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe years. But Jesus was amazed with her tenacity. Can I give you an acronym for the word hope? Hope is spelled H-O-P-E. And so for some of you who've sat through this message and you say you don't get it, I don't have any hope left. Let me tell you what hope means. Hold on. Pain ends. Hold on. Hold on. Because pain ends. And I realize your situation may seem impossible. It may seem insurmountable. But hold on. Because today just might be the day. I know you've cried all those tears. I know you've prayed all those prayers, and they have not been cried, and they have not been prayed in vain. Because I've told you before, I'll tell you again, every tear you've cried, every prayer that you've prayed, Revelation says is stored in vials in heaven. You know what I think about, Sister Kim, when I read that verse? I think of vials of blood in a lab. I don't know how many vials of blood that the hospital takes up in a day. Thousands. Thousands of glass vials filled with blood. And if you've ever gotten blood taken, Brother Jason, they got barcodes on them. They got names on them. They got dates of birth on them. They got social security numbers. Everything's on that vial. Everything they know about you, they're going to find out through that blood in a vial.
Come on, Pastor, that's a good word.
And I'm here to tell you, every cry, tear you've cried, every prayer you prayed, there's a vial in heaven with your name on it. There's a vial in heaven. Come on now, there's a vial in heaven with your first, your middle, and your last name on it. And it said, this vial contains every tear and every prayer that's been prayed. And it keeps getting filled and filled and filled and filled until one day it overflows. Are you tired of crying your tears? Good. Cry some more. Because some of our vials just need to be filled up a little bit more to let that blessing of God come pouring out. Maybe you're sitting here thinking, Pastor, you don't understand how big my problem is. You're right, I don't, but God does. So here we're going to have our praise singers come up. We're going to sing something. You want God to answer your prayer, then we need to do like this Syrophoenician Gentile dog did. First, we need to come. We need to come. And I know some of you, many of you have touched the throne of heaven today. That's awesome. But one touch isn't good enough. Let's touch it again. But you got to come.